You are listening to Mushing on First Paw Media. Visit our website at mushing.com.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert, and you're listening to our continuing coverage of the Iditarod 53 2025 race. It is on its, second full day here, and I am here with my co-host, Michelle. Michelle, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. I'm super excited about tonight.
I am too, and we are joined by a special co-host, Rohn Buser. I'm sure a lot of people know the name. Rohn, I know this is probably your first time hosting a podcast, but welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much. Can you do us a favor and tell us briefly who you are and what you're all about, please?
Yeah, my name is Rohn Buser. I grew up around the Iditarod. I'm named after one of the Iditarod checkpoints. Not being traveled on the trail this year, but and I also am not on the trail this year. But yeah, my dad's run 39 Iditarods. My wife and I own and operate Susitna Sled Dog Adventures, touring and racing kennel. So we've got 57 dogs. We're going to be signing up for Iditarod next year, so definitely won't be able to co-host next year, but happy to hop in, give some commentary, give my 2 cents, and just follow this year's race in a fun way.
I look forward to it as well. So, Rohn, you talked about doing Iditarod. I know you grew up there in an Iditarod family. How many times have you run the race?
3.
And what years was that?
So I ran the Iditarod in 2008, 2012, and 2015. So 15 being one of the Fairbanks years. So I'm maybe a little bit familiar with the route, but we did a slightly different route that year where from Galena, we went north up to Huslia and then back onto the traditional route. So this one's slightly different. Should make for an exciting race. Or if you're in the race, a lot of river miles, so slightly different.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that tonight as well. So with that Iditarod under your belt, I know that you have run the Cusco 300 and other races. What do you think, aside from Iditarod, Rohn, what is your favorite race in Alaska?
I mean, Iditarod is definitely the most complex. It's the longest. It's got the most the most different variables that can happen throughout the trail. So that's, I think, probably it's like the ultimate test of dog driver or dog musher and skill in managing a team throughout the 8.5 to 14 days that teams take to cover the trail. I like the Cusco 300. It's a great race. It's fast. It's quite a bit different than Iditarod, but yeah, I like that one. They run a really well put together organization out of Bethel. So yeah, they're an awesome race organization. The Cusco 300 does a great job supporting mushing in the region and in the state of Alaska in general. But I haven't run all the Alaska races. I haven't run any races outside of Alaska, so I couldn't tell you a favorite quite yet.
All right, and before we jump into tonight's show, tell us a little bit about Susitna Sled Dog Adventures.
Yeah, so Susitna Sled Dog Adventures is our kennel name and also our business name. We do just a variety of dog sled tours from our home. Basically, it involves people coming, meeting the dogs, spending a lot of time with the dogs, sharing the trail with them, and learning about our passion for mushing, kind of seeing what goes into raising a team, putting together a team, and being around working sled dogs on an ongoing basis. And so it's fun to share the lifestyle and share the love of the dogs with everyone else.
So for folks that may be tourists to Alaska or you are a resident, Alyssa and Rohn are on the east side of the Parks Highway, just outside of Talkeetna. Pretty much heading up that way, you make a right very close to the Montana Creek sled dogs up there, and that is their home trails. And you guys are doing a lot of cool stuff. You're doing day tours, night tours, all year round tours. You guys have it going on. I got the pleasure to sit down with both of these guys early this past summer to do an article for Mushing Magazine. I got to see their place and talk about what they're doing. So I am glad that you were here with us, Rohn. I think it's going to be fun to hang out with you guys for the next couple of weeks. So let's jump right into the show here. We're recording this at about 7 o'clock Alaska time, and as we always do, we'll do a quick update of where people are standing. So bib number 1, Jason Mackey, is at mile 939, followed by Gabe Dunham, Paige Drobny, Ryan Reddington, and Matt Hall. And at the back of the pack, we have bib number 33, Calvin Doherty, at mile 119, Quince Mountain at 137, Ebbe Peterson at 137, and Bryce Mumford at 137 as well. So I guess the big note of that is between first and last place right now, we have a mileage of 69 miles. And I know they have a much more conservative race with those back of the packers than they do the fast teams at the front. And I'm sure we can talk about that with Rohn as we are going with that. So Michelle, I know you've been busy checking things out as we gear up for the show. Any quick stories that you want to talk about before we jump into the big ones?
I really would like to talk about the historical factors surrounding Tanana and Manly checkpoints. And so I understand that most of our listeners know that this year marks the 100-year anniversary of the 1925 Serum Run. And due to trail conditions and weather, Iditarod set out to blaze a trail to Nome from Fairbanks, and in doing so, chose to include several of the Serum Run checkpoints. And so today, many of the Mushers made it to Manly, and Manly was one of the original checkpoints for the Mushers carrying the serum. As a matter of fact, Edgar Calland, he was the Musher who traveled to Manly Hot Springs out of Tanana. Dan Green was the Musher who traveled along to Fish Lake. Not a checkpoint for this year's Iditarod. But then Johnny Folger, Musher, he traveled on to Tanana. So here's a little fact about the Manly Roadhouse. It was erected in 1907 by Frank Manly. Manly built a 4-story resort hotel with 45 rooms, a bowling alley, and even an Olympic-sized indoor pool. Can you imagine?
It is a cool place. I've been there when we did our Serum Run trip in 2020. And Rohn, I know that you traveled this route, as you mentioned, in 2015. Let's jump right into that. Let's talk about this first third of this year's Iditarod. And we're going to talk from about Fairbanks to about Ruby, I guess, would be a pretty good third. Can you tell us a bit about that, Rohn?
Yeah, it's a lot of river miles. So from Fairbanks, pretty straightforward. It's you hop on the river, and then you travel down the river to Tanana. So that's river miles all the way to Tanana. That's a nice 52 mile run to Tanana. And not really many surprises. Leaving Tanana, they do a little bit of an overland route. I think they call it the old mail trail. So I believe that's the trail that they took carrying the serum from Tanana's got the railroad right there, and then it's kind of an overland trail. Basically a good portion of the way, or pretty much all the way to Manly, and then leaving Manly, we get back on the river and travel to Tanana, more river miles. So from there, it's a long stretch to Ruby. I think it's 119 or 120 miles to Ruby. 117 is what they have on the GPS. So long stretches of nothing but river running. And the further you go down the Yukon River, the bigger the river gets. So, that's a kind of an interesting, way of running the trail where it's wide open spaces, but still kind of the same thing from one day to the next. But that's just
So I know that the Tanana and the Yukon River converge right there in the village of Tanana. Michelle, do you have some information about Tanana?
Yeah, I do. And Roan is exactly right. The trail has not changed oh, pretty much since the early 1900s. But let's go circle back to the Manly Roadhouse because sadly that resort burnt to the ground in 1913. So what you guys see when you get into Manly is the Roadhouse, but not the resort hotel. The town of Manly never held more than 500 residents, and it was once a mining operation that died down, and then the town did as well. Mushers will be approaching Tanana next, as we've just discussed. Almost a decade ago, a gravel road was put in place, making it so you can drive to Tanana, essentially making this the last stop on the trail to return to civilization quickly. The road to Tanana is a single-lane gravel road that runs from Manly Hot Springs to the Yukon River. And Tanana is rich in history. It is the location of the Tanana Chiefs Conference, home of the Tanana Athabascans who lived in the Tanana Valley and lowlands for millennia. They were semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers organized into clans that used potlatches to distribute wealth. Their lodges were covered in animal skins. They hunted caribou, moose, mountain sheep, and small terrestrial animals. And this year in January, Dog Musher Jonathan Hayes of Maine retraced the 1925 Serum Run with a team of Sepala Siberians. And at this very moment, Emily, Stanley, and Walter Robinson are retracing the Serum Run Trail themselves, taking some time in each village to speak to the youth. And I have it on good information that they arrived in Tanana about an hour ago.
Very cool. So, Roan, we asked our listeners to call in and ask us questions. And for folks that may not know that number, it's 303-578-9881. You can find that in our show notes. But Roan, I'm going to have you answer this first question right off the bat. It comes from a listener just last night. They said, with these river miles, it appears that the front runners are going pretty fast. And as they say, the average team, I guess, is going about 10-ish miles an hour. Do you think that this is typically faster now than it is in a typical Iditarod? And if so, or if not, why?
That's a good question. I think one of the things, without being out on the trail and seeing the snow conditions, but I think one of the things that could be contributing to fairly fast travel times is kind of just the way that this winter has been in general. Meaning we've had a lot of warm temperatures in the daytime, and then reasonably cooler temperatures. I mean, reasonably meaning below freezing point temperatures at night. So what that brings forth is pretty fast trail. Because it gets a little slushy, gets a little melted out during the day if the sun is hot, if it's warm. But then as long as the temperatures get below freezing, the trail sets up really nice at night and then will be pretty good throughout the day. So it means a good base, a good firm trail, not a lot of really soft spots in the trail for the dogs to for their feet to sink in, which causes slow travel time, slow running, leading to just a trail that the dogs can generally cruise down pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. So I'm not surprised to see the travel speeds that they are. My question is, for this race being so many river miles, how many teams are hauling dogs? How many teams are hauling how many dogs? And how that's going to play out later in the race because of the increased distance compared to other years in the Iditarod.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about that as we get deeper into the race, because that is a strategy that a lot of mushers use, especially with today's gear and how it's different with the trailers and the cabooses and a little bit emptier bag in the front where oftentimes we've had to carry gear there. And we're going to talk about that story in just a second. But when we talk about fast, Roan, we're talking about 9-10 miles an hour at the front runners compared to about 7 to 8 miles an hour for the guys in the back. Now, I know a lot of people think that 2 miles an hour is not that big of a difference, but every hour at 2 miles an hour slower, that really adds up, doesn't it?
Yeah, over the the course of 1,000 miles, little half a mile difference will lead to pretty substantial time differential. So yeah, that slight time difference definitely plays a factor as you get further and further along the trail. Um, yeah, if you look at the tracker, that's one of the things that you can kind of look at is of the front teams, the moving average, and kind of comparing those. That's one of the ways that is I think an easy way of assessing the overall speed of the teams without having to really dive into analyzing how much rest each team took, because one team might be further ahead because they're resting less, but then if you look at their overall travel speed, they might be up there because they haven't done their next rest stop yet. So, moving average definitely plays an important factor in analyzing the race.
So we talked about at the beginning of the show, we're going to mention about that first third of the race and that from Fairbanks to about Ruby. And you had mentioned that it is a very long run from Tanana to Ruby. They have that as one checkpoint to the other this year without any stops whatsoever. I believe it's listed as 117 miles. All on the Yukon River, as you mentioned, quite wide there as you're working your way through. It can definitely be pretty cold in that range there. And I'm going to have Michelle come here in just a second. But in those longer runs, what are you looking at for that? How many runs is that going to be for the mushers? Maybe between the two different types of mushing, these speed demons at the front versus these slower teams at the back. How would you break that down, that really long run there? Because that is the longest distance between two checkpoints on this route.
Yeah, that's a long way on the river. I don't know what they did in the Alaska Yukon Quest from what was it, Circle to Eagle. I think they had a long stretch on the river, but I don't know if it was 117 miles. But basically, if you do rest in Tanana, 117 miles to Ruby, and then 50 to Galena, so that's another long stretch. There's generally two ways you can split it up: 3 40-mile runs or 2 60-mile runs. So you could choose to rest before Tanana, skip Tanana, but then you're doing 2 camps on the way to Ruby. So a lot of people, for efficiency of hauling less supplies along the way, probably are going to stop in Tanana and then do halfway to Ruby. I think there's I don't know if there's a camp there. I know some people a lot of people did that in 2 runs. I myself did it in 3 runs. So I rested in Tanana, went a little over 40 miles, rested once, did another run, did another rest stop, and then made it to Ruby. So split it up into 3 runs. But I expect most of the teams, especially the front teams, to split that distance into 2 runs.
Michelle, you want to add something here?
Hey, Rohn, I heard also, I was watching the video in Manly earlier this evening, and Jody Bailey came on, and I think she said that the first 8-hour rest is going to be done in Galena. So that's a long ways off even for the first mandatory 8-hour, don't you think?
Honestly, I have not had time to even assess that. So the first 8, the first of the Yukon, that's typically in either, was it Ruby or is it Anvik or Shagler? I've never run the Southern route. Sorry. So yeah, the first of the is that also where the first of the Yukon Award will be presented?
I'm guessing that that's what they're doing, which I thought it was going to be Ruby, but she said Galena. And so I'm guessing that they're going to do the first to the Yukon in Galena, which is what they normally do, right?
Not in Galena. They do, as Rohn mentioned, there on either route. That's sort of where those 2 circles come together, that northern and southern route. They're coming together at that checkpoint there right as they hit the Yukon. And we're definitely going to talk about those awards as we're working our way. So as they pull into those larger checkpoints of Galena and Ruby and Tanana, and of course back on this way into Manly, as they're spread across the river, obviously less and less people, creature comforts, if you will, of the checkpoints, not necessarily for the mushers, but for the the volunteers and the fans that are coming in and out on planes and all of that. One last question before we jump over, Rohn. When you were doing this route on this first third, did you have a favorite one of these checkpoints? As we mentioned, either Ruby, Galena, Tanana, Manly, Nenana. Any of those really stand out to you?
I mean, I did enjoy Nanana because it's the last, typically the last checkpoint where you see a lot of people, kind of your, I don't want to call it support crew, but the people that helped you, send off at the starting line because they're, close to the road system. So it's kind of the last place you see, a lot of familiar faces before, being out on the trail. So it's kind of different than a Willow start where, you see everybody in Willow and then you're out on the trail till Nome. So, yeah, Nanana was pretty cool for that reason. And then as far as Manly, the checkpoint, the year that I ran it, it was basically they just have it set up in a field. So there's a couple wall tents and I think some comms and kind of it's fairly bare bones as far as checkpoints go. So it's not right in the community building. I don't know if that's different for this year or kind of the same area. But then Tanana is great because it's kind of a long run from Manly to Tanana, and then you get to Tanana. It's a really warm welcome. It's right in one of the community buildings in the village, and you're kind of right in the middle of downtown, if you want to call it that. And so yeah, it's a pretty warm checkpoint, really really hospitable. So and then leaving Tanana, you're back on the river for quite a while. So it's the last taste of hospitality you'll get until Ruby. So yeah, Tanana's a great checkpoint as well. Manly is, it's more of kind of a stop along the way, at least for the teams running the race.
Yeah, and I was not doing it as a competitive musher. I was actually on a snow machine on that 2020 Serum Run, and I really enjoyed the hospitality there in all three of those villages of Tanana, Ruby, and Galena. Of course, us traveling much slower than race pace, we got to spend time, at the school and all of that stuff, and it was quite a bit of a warm welcome for sure. So our next story is another question from one of our listeners, and they are asking, what do we carry in the sled? And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say, Rohn. I'm going to talk a little bit about the mandatory gear that we have to carry on Iditarod. Then I'll have you go, and then I'll have Michelle mention what she would carry in her sled. She is not a racer, but she has done plenty of semi-distance runs, I guess. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I like to carry as well. So the mandatory gear that we have to carry is an axe, snowshoes, a cooker, dog booties, sled bag that will zip all the way up, and a sleeping bag. Am I forgetting anything, Rohn, in terms of mandatory gear besides the vet book?
The trail mail, that's, symbolic. Did you say that? All right, sorry. I don't know. I'd have to look at the race rules to double check to make sure I've got everything in my sled bag. Typically, when I'm running races, I put together a checklist for that specific race and will kind of just keep that on hand, keep it in my phone, or just print it out, laminate it, and just make sure like, okay, run through this. This is what's relevant for this particular race. Got it in the sled bag. Good to go.
So let's talk about what you carry. And of course, different races and different race trails will require different types of stuff. Even between checkpoints, you may carry different things. But aside from the mandatory stuff, are you carrying interesting things? I mean, do you always have something in your bag that you never forget, whatever that may be? and some other things that you'll carry. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before I turn it over to Michelle. So what do you carry in your bag if you were doing this part of the trail right now?
In addition to the mandatory gear, definitely a lot of extra fuel for the cooker, especially leaving Tanana. That's a long way. So the particular year that I ran, it was cold. It was 40, 60 below for quite a few nights out on the trail. So extra fuel for a cook stove. If you think, well, it typically takes me 3 or 4 bottles of heat to make a nice hot meal for the dogs, budget yourself with 6 for the cooker. Other than that, so extra fuel for the cooker. I mean, lots of extra food. Having this race being just I guess it's not necessarily fewer checkpoints, but some of the early checkpoints, further distances between them, having lots of extra supplies is pretty helpful if you run into a situation where you need it. So I always like to have dry socks, dry gloves, vacuum sealed away, just in case I run into some overflow or something like that. I can get into my dry gear and have warm fingers and toes. Extra hand warmers. Again, the temperatures have been pretty mild so far. I think the weather for Tanana right now is 27 degrees, so pretty warm. But you never know. It's Iditarod. It could be 60 below in a couple of days. So hand warmers are pretty handy for putting in your boots, putting in your gloves. So I like to have a lot of those on hand, ready to go. Other than that, ski poles. Trail gets slow. You help the dogs out ski poling and pedaling alongside the sled. But try to travel light, but try to be prepared. That's the balance. And you can lean one side towards having extra gear. Some people carry an extra brake bar in their sled, and all sorts of everything but the kitchen sink type of setup. And then other times, you just kind of go with the bare minimum. On the section between Tanana and Ruby, I had a really interesting thing happen. My cooker actually got a leak in it, which was really bizarre. I was making making water for the dogs, camped out on the first camp, and I noticed that my fire was getting really low. And I looked on my pot, and it had a little pinhole leak dripping down, putting out the fuel for the cooker. I think it was kind of a stress crack from the cold temps early on that year. It was really cold. And so the next camp, I found some other teams. I was running at night, and I ran across a couple teams and happened to stop next to Alan Moore. And I stopped my team, kind of got them settled in, and I went up to the team in front of me and I said, "Hey, do you, this is kind of a weird question, but can I borrow your cook pot? Mine has a leak in it, if you believe that." And he said, "Hey, look at this." And his had a leak as well. So it happened to be that here we are. I guess we should have brought a spare cooker along the way for that particular race. So you can plan and plan and plan for having contingency stuff and extra gear, but you never know what kind of challenges you're going to face. So I ended up plugging it with a safety pin, and it held until Galena, where I had some backup supplies out on the trail. So that was kind of a crazy story about extreme cold, metal fatigue, and
very
you see on the trail.
Very interesting for sure. So 2 questions really before we turn this over to Michelle, what she would carry. So the first question, Rohn, is did you come up in the time where you were running dogs in these longer races without the trail dragger and all that extra stuff, meaning just kind of traditional type sled? And if so, do you prefer one type of setup over another? That's the first question.
I think I ran my very first junior Iditarod with a traditional sled where you stand at the very back. Maybe my first 2. So 14 and 15, maybe 14. I think it was just one, honestly. Before I switched over to the sit down sled design, the tail dragger design. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm most familiar with, most comfortable with as far as having a compartment on the back, having a place to sit, having a place to put extra gear, and not only that, but also having a second chance to grab onto if you let go of your handlebars. And honestly, the first time I ran a race last year, there's a Sheep Creek Lodge hosted a 50-mile fun run race, and I took the tail dragger part off of my sled because it happened to have broken on a training run, minor break, but I chose not to fix it and chose to just take it off because it's just a quick, easy 50-mile fun run race. What am I going to put back there anyway? I'm not going to sit down the whole time. And I happened to lose my team because I just kind of didn't have anything behind me to catch me. And so that was I'm so used to the design that's just the type of sled that I've worked with for since I was a kid, essentially.
Yeah, even the most seasoned vets can definitely lose a team if there's something else set up. So the last question for you, Rohn, on this topic is: I know when we spoke this summer, you were raving about, I believe it was your mom's molasses cookies, and people love to know what the mushers are eating out on the trail. What is your favorite meal out there if you're doing Iditarod? Is there just something that you're craving to think, man, I can't wait till I make it to cow tag because I have X in my bag?
I mean, what I always did with Iditarod food drops was kind of send kind of the top 3 or maybe 3 of the top 5 meals that some of my favorite meals to every checkpoint. But as far as me out on the trail, I eat a lot of candy. Not candy like hard candy, but a lot of dessert type stuff, cookies and cake. I don't know, that works for me. Poppy seed cake with butter in it. Oatmeal molasses cookies. Hearty, but pretty sugary stuff. But that, and then a lot of different forms of caffeine, whether it's coffee or energy gels, energy drinks. Not energy drinks, but like gummies with energy. Obviously, for those long river miles, staying awake can sometimes be a challenge. I mean, I guess you don't necessarily need to stay awake the whole time. If your team is cruising along really good, you might as well take advantage of that and catch a little rest. Quick 5-10 minute nap. Wake up, make sure you see a couple trail markers. Do that again. So maybe caffeine is a detriment to that. I know there's people with varying opinions on that, but for me, I mean, when I'm doing long days, a lot of long hours, either coffee or chocolate covered espresso beans, things like that. That keeps me going when it's a long day out there.
All right, let's turn it over to Michelle. What do you have in your sled bag?
Well, definitely not a sleeping bag, since the majority of the races I've done are less than 50 miles. And so I like to travel light, and I think it is a way for us to give a different perspective for those of us that do not do long distance races, but we do the little races at the local dog musher clubs, and I do a lot of dry land races, which means I'm not carrying a whole lot of anything. But in my sled bag, I like to keep at least 1, if not 3 extra collars, necklines for sure. My multi-tool is on me, but I also like to have one stowed away in my sled bag somewhere. Extra knit gloves are a given. Booties for the dogs. Even on those shorter races, you might come across a situation where you've got a dog that has torn a pad or gotten a little bit of a raw spot, so you want to make sure you booty those dogs up and keep booties on them the entire time you're out there. And then most definitely, I've always got my iPhone on me because typically I'm last and I need to at least let Robert know that I didn't fall into the lake or something silly and I'm still making my way to the finish line.
And since you have not done a lot of camping or overnights with your dogs, you probably don't have a favorite trail meal, but do you have a favorite trail snack?
I like to always have a granola bar on me somewhere, just in case. You never know, something might happen. You might get snagged, whatever. I'm typically snow machine support, so I don't usually get the opportunity to snack because both hands are always on the bars. But I remember when I helped pack our daughter Nicole's junior Iditarod snacks. And one of the things she said too was, Mom, when you packed my snacks for Willow 100, I didn't eat any of that. I didn't want any of that stuff. And so we did something that we did when she was a Girl Scout and I was her Girl Scout leader. And we just basically opened up every one of her favorite snacks, from beef jerky to M&Ms to pretzels and peanuts and all of those things you can think of, including some hard candy, some Sour Patch Kids, the whole thing that you guys can think of if you were born in the late 90s or early 2000s. All of that candy went into one bag, and then we shook it all up, and then we divvied it up into smaller bags, and that's what she ate because she wanted something small and quick that she didn't have to fuss with, because quite honestly, she would get so sleep deprived that she wouldn't want to eat anything.
Yeah, I remember those days for sure. A little bit different setting up a junior musher than one of us heading out for.
I don't know, Robert. You tend to eat a lot of candy on the trail.
I do.
I got to admit it.
I was going to say I am very similar to Rohn out there. Beside my mandatory gear, I tend to travel a little light. I am a one ski pole guy myself. I love watching those guys doing the double ski pole leaning up against the handlebar. That's pretty cool. Some of the things outside of what Rohn said, I do carry the extra socks and extra gloves and the batteries and all of that stuff as well. I do like to carry a pair of I guess they're called trauma shears or whatever. They're the Leatherman Raptors. I like to carry those to cut open the bags of stuff, whether it be human food or dog food. And of course, if you have to cut a line or something, those work out real well. I am a music guy out on the trail, so I like to carry something that will play music out there. And unlike Rohn, I am more a fan of kind of the old school stand-up style. And of course, I have not run Iditarod yet, so I'm not a convert yet, but I find myself, and I've been doing this since the early 90s, I find myself pretty comfortable just standing there for however long you got to do it. I would imagine after 10 days, it's a little bit different, but I don't have any problems standing there for 50 or 60 miles. And like Rohn said, I guess you could take a nap if you had to. I know some guys, I am not one of them, do tie themselves to the sled as they get a little bit more sleep deprived, but that's a story for another day. And my favorite trail snacks or meals is I really like beef jerky, gummy bears, and 5 Hour Energy. I know Rohn said that is a differing opinion for a lot of people. I'm not a coffee fan out on the trail for sure. And I do like carrying slices of pizza that are in the vacuum packed Ziploc bag type things, and just kind of do a little bit of a dunk in the water and off to the races, as they say. But otherwise, I just eat whatever is the fancy and has enough calories and enough fat in it to keep me awake and keep me going. Rohn, let's circle back to you on this before we end this segment here. Did we miss anything or anything else you want to mention about what is in your sled bag?
You mentioned batteries. That's a great point. Especially on some of these stretches where it's a long way between a checkpoint, so long way between electricity. Nowadays, rechargeable batteries have come a long way. I like to have a headlamp that has AA batteries, just in case. You got a stack of AA's, you can throw them in, that'll keep you going. But if lithium-ion technology, it's pretty advanced. I actually just picked up a battery pack that has quite a bit of capacity, and it's also got a heating element in it, so it's supposed to come on, keep the battery warm so it can discharge even in sub-zero temperatures. So yeah, what a time to be alive. But yeah, spare batteries for sure. While power your headlamp, kind of budget yourself, plan on maybe making it to your 24 on batteries you have in your sled, because that's a spot that you're going to be at the checkpoint for 24 hours. Charge up all your extra batteries, and other than that, kind of just run on what you got. This year it's going to be interesting because it looks like the moon it's getting nice and bright. It was kind of went away during the nights for about a week ago, but it's getting brighter and brighter every day tonight. So you might not even need your headlamp. If you're going on the river, just turn your headlamp off, run your dogs under the light of the moon. Conserve electricity, I guess. I've been looking at the temps for the different checkpoints further down the river, and looks to be pretty mellow. So that's another thing is, minimizing resting during the night. That might be something that different strategies, different people, pay attention to, is not running during the heat of the day, trying to optimize their rest hours during the hours when the trail gets softer, temperatures get warmer. Might be a little bit slower, but who knows? I'm not out there. I'm not on the trail, so couldn't tell you. Yeah. Other than that, things on the sled. I don't listen to a lot of music while I'm running anymore. I guess I just I've got a couple of young kids, so maybe I enjoy the sounds of silence at this point in my life. But yeah, I don't know. I try to stay pretty bare bones in my sled, but a lot of emergency gear.
So I have to ask, since you brought this up, if I remember correctly, it was your dad, Martin, that had the tent that time, wasn't it?
He developed a pop-up tent incorporated into his sled bag that he could just pop out, and didn't even need to go in the checkpoint, just sleep right next to the dogs. Pretty efficient setup. I know your Olsum also had a sled that had a tent built into the sled bag, so he could just like pop it out to the side. So that's something that's pretty handy, especially if it's raining. I mean, I've been on the Iditarod Trail and we've gotten rained on, and that's not really that fun. It wasn't pouring down rain when I was out there, but I know some years people are wearing garbage bags and ponchos, and camping and that stuff is a whole different challenge because you got to keep your gear dry for later on in the race. But yeah, having a little tent, that's a small weight penalty, but a lot of comfort, which might pay off later down the trail.
For sure. So let's jump on over to the fan favorite segment of the night, and that is our Musher profile. And Rohn, I did not mention this before we went on air, but I typically do not know who Michelle is going to talk about that night. So I am flying blind just like you are. Sometimes I know these people, sometimes I don't. But Michelle, who is the Musher profile of the evening?
Well, I'm going to say probably one of the more interesting people I have interviewed in a while, Keaton Loebrich. He's out of Stargazers Racing. Now, he is a former infantry Marine, as it does say on his profile. He has a passion for science and business. He graduated from Central Michigan University with that degree in finance. He's currently focusing on mushing dogs. He's completed the Willow 300, the Yukon Quest 300, the Percy DeWolf Memorial Mail Run, and the completion of these races qualified him for Iditarod. He started his own sled dog kennel in 2023 with his now wife that he met at the Husky Homestead. They also spent some time together as tour guides for Trailbreaker Kennels. But he discovered Alaska by filling out a job resume for the Jeep tour guides out of Denali. I thought Robert might get a kick out of that, considering we do have the sled dog Jeep. So you might need to contact Keaton and find out what exactly you're missing so he can utilize a little bit of that astrophysics courses that he took. But yeah, Keaton is the consummate adventurer.
I know that you got a chance to interview him at the ceremonial start, and those were tough to get because, as you know, the dogs were barking like crazy. It was almost go time, so we only had a few minutes there to hang out with all of those guys. What did Keaton have to say during that quick interview?
Well, my question to everyone that I did try to speak with was, why do you Iditarod? Which, Rohn, you can answer that question for us if you like in a moment. But why do you Iditarod? Threw a lot of them off they had no idea what I was asking them. Keaton, though, he knew exactly what I was asking him. He said, I Iditarod because of the bonding I develop with my dogs. I love to get out there and chase the sunset and into the evening so that I can chase the sunrise.
Very cool. Yeah, he seems like a pretty cool dude. Reminds me of a ski guide or a river guide or something like that. The times I've heard him speak. Yeah, he did work there at a couple of those big kennels up there at Jeff King's place and Susan Butcher's family's place up there in Fairbanks. I do not know him. I know he's excited to jump on the podcast when he gets back, as he mentioned to you. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to get to know Keaton when he comes back. Rohn, have you had any dealings with this guy here, Keaton?
I know he finished the Yukon Quest Alaska 550 this year. So I also did run into him on the trail. Well, in the checkpoints. I ran the Alaska Quest 300 last year. And yeah, he ended up finishing in front of me. And I guess when he was leaving the checkpoint of Circle, heading back to Central, he had gotten off his rest and was getting going. And I told him I kind of like in the checkpoint building. I told him, hey, I'm taking a little bit of extra rest here. I'm not ready to chase you out, so don't worry about me. And I guess when he got to the finish line, he was he was convinced that I was chasing him down, trying to catch him. I finished a few hours later, but so yeah, I met him on the trail. I know I think he got a beard care sponsor. I'm not sure on that. I know at the finish line he was looking for one, so I know he's got a glorious beard. But yeah, other than that, I mean, he seems like a great guy. Been learning and working for other kennels and kind of got his own thing going now, so that's pretty awesome.
So Stargazer Kennel is the name of Keaton's place, and I'm just going to look very quickly to see where he is at the time that we're talking about this. He is at mile 137. He is resting. He still has all 16 dogs, 991 miles to the finish, and he is bib number 29. So guys that are listening, definitely check this guy out. Check him out on Facebook, and he does have a LinkedIn profile. I don't think a lot of mushers have LinkedIn profiles, but he is a business.
All the years I've been doing the musher profiles, he's the first one I saw with a LinkedIn, and I was like, what?
Well,
what is this?
He is a finance guy, so he's got to. I wonder how he looks in a 3-piece suit as a business guy.
Rohn said he's got this killer beard, but I'm over here trying not to laugh because Rohn's chasing him down the trail. Probably gave him a little bit more quick in his step.
Yeah, so I look forward to following him along, and I love the stories from Rohn with him and the checkpoint. So guys, this is why we have invited Rohn on. He is able to add a little bit of, in the sports broadcasting world, a little bit of color to the commentary, and I think that's going to be a very cool addition to our podcast this year. Rohn, before we go and talk about tomorrow's episode, is there anything else you want to mention about what's happening today, or where do you stand?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly hard to tell at this point who's got a lead, who's playing it conservative, and it takes a few days for the front runners to kind of shake themselves out, and the people who are starting a little bit slower, but close enough to the front to make a move, to really work their make themselves known. The run from Tanana to Ruby, that's a long way. I mean, that's under 17 miles, 17 hours of running if you're going 10 miles an hour, and I doubt teams are going to be traveling at that speed in the middle of the day. So call it 8.5 or so miles an hour, cruising down that, whatever hours that takes. Plus, yeah, the rest, one rest probably for some of the teams that are doing that in 2 runs, 2 rests. So the next day, kind of is going to focus on the run to Ruby and see who's doing it in 2, who's doing it in 3, who's passing through Tanana, and going to split that run up into a little bit of different segments. And I think from there it'll start to show who is, focusing on kind of the next runs ahead. There's always some front runners in Iditarod. Right now, Jason Mackey's that guy. He's the one blazing the trail for everyone else, and that's one place to be. But a lot of times in Iditarod, the person who's in lead from day 1 or day 2, is not necessarily there at the finish line. So there's a front group developing right now. Looks like they're hustling their way into Tanana. My guess is that Jason, Paige, Gabe, and Ryan, not looking at, I haven't analyzed their previous run rest schedules up to this point, but just by where they're at on the trail, where they're headed, almost to Tanana, I think those 4 will probably split the run to Ruby in 2 runs. So they'll rest in Tanana a few hours, go through halfway to Ruby, rest. Pretty good timing, actually. By the time they get to their rest, it's just hitting the heat of the day. Shut their teams down in the middle of the day, halfway to Ruby, rest for a few hours, and then as the temperatures cool off, as the trail improves, temperatures get better for running dogs, they'll cruise to Ruby. So looks like there's a group in front that's setting themselves up pretty nicely for 2 runs to Ruby, but I honestly haven't looked at where they're camping, how long they've camped, and everything else previously, just with everything else I've got going on in life. But those front 4, they're making their way into Tanana right now. So this time tomorrow they might be in Ruby or close to Ruby, I think. Getting close to Ruby. So we'll see what develops tomorrow.
Well, and that sort of leads us into what we're going to talk about tomorrow, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that. It's going to talk a little bit about race strategy, how you figure that out going into a race like this. I know everybody was thrown a curveball by changing the route in just about 2 weeks' time, so I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about that, because that is its whole other animal. So that is our feature story for tomorrow that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about what people are doing, if there's any other things that are developing. And I do encourage you guys to head out and hit those follows and subscribe buttons, because you never know when we're going to be on, and you want to make sure you get those episodes. Rohn, to pull us out of here, tell us one more time how folks can follow you, whether you're on socials, your website, or whatever, just to make sure everybody knows how to check you out.
Susitna Sled Dog Adventures. That's SUSITNA Sled Dog Adventures. That's our Instagram, and Facebook as well. So that's where we post the most content. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And that's kind of our business page, but we post all of our racing info there as well. So
all right,
it's the best way to follow us.
Yep, we'll definitely share those as well. Michelle, quickly, do you have anything before we go?
Well, hopefully we can find out why Rohn Iditarods.
Yeah, we'll ask him that the next time he is. Yeah, we're going to talk to him about that. So on behalf of my 2 co-hosts, Rohn Buser and my wife, Michelle, this is Robert for the Burled Arch podcast. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Are you a fan of the great outdoors? Do you enjoy the thrill of speed and adventure? Then listen up. Introducing Mushing, your ultimate guide to the exciting world of dog-powered sports and mushing. Whether you're a seasoned musher or just starting out, Mushing has got you covered. Get ready to immerse yourself in captivating stories of incredible sled dog races, expert training tips from seasoned professionals, and gear reviews to help you make the right choices for your team. From the breathtaking landscapes of Alaska to the snowy trails of Scandinavia, Mushing takes you on a thrilling journey through the world of dog-powered sports. Don't miss out on the latest issue, packed with exclusive interviews with top mushers, in-depth articles on sled dog nutrition, and stunning photography that will transport you to the heart of the action. So whether you're dreaming of competing in the Iditarod or simply want to learn more about this incredible sport, mushing is your go-to resource. Subscribe now and get ready to unleash your passion for mushing. Visit our website at mushing.com or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Mushing, where the spirit of adventure meets the power of the pack.